Again, we'll continue to encourage you to drop your names in the chat. Buenos días. Si gustan compartir su afiliación y su título y dónde el condado se encuentran, usen el chat para compartir eso con sus compañeros aquí en la llamada de hoy. Gracias por acompañarnos esta mañana. Okay, well, at this moment, I'd like to turn it over to public comments on the agenda. Invite those of you who are here joining us, who aren't part of the formal HRTC, but are here to learn alongside of the rest of us. If you'd like to come off mute or raise your hand and offer some update or a comment or some information you'd like to share with the group, now's your time to do that. So I'll take a couple seconds here to acknowledge anybody who wants to come off mute or raise their hands, and Jesse will help me do the same.
Yeah, so I'm monitoring on the, I say the members of the public side. So let's give it 15 seconds. If there's anyone in attendee view, there's a comment to the group or question, please raise your hand. And I can promote you to panelist for the moment.
I'm not seeing anything on mine, Jesse.
No, it looks good. I think we can go to the next item.
That sounds good. So, which is inviting those of you on the HRTC, ustedes que son parte de la mesa de gobernancia de esta iniciativa, si gustan compartir algo con el resto de sus compañeros, sus compañeras aquí esta mañana, un anuncio, una novedad nueva, un evento que tal vez nos está aproximando, si gustan invitar, feel free to come off mute. If there's any of you who want to share an update, a new development with your peers here, or an upcoming event, questions related to this process, now's the time to offer that comment as an HRTC member. And we'll get started with Desiree. I think, Desiree, you had an update or an announcement you wanted to share, so let me turn to you.
Yes, so I happen to be working with the state of California and the Ocean Protection Council, and there was some funding through SB1 that is there in order to create plans to plan for sea level rise for those municipalities and cities that are along the coast of California. And so I'm actually on the technical assistance group that is working with tribes and municipalities who want to apply for this funding. But the funding is specifically geared toward environmental justice communities, which is the communities that we're working with, as well as federally recognized and California Indian tribes and small and rural communities. And I put the link to the funding that there into the chat. And this is a great way in order to develop those plans for the various cities and municipalities, particularly to hit those communities that are not, have the financial resources in order to deal with sea level rise in the future. So this is a great funding opportunity, and I just want everybody to let everybody know that it's available.
Great, thank you, Desiree, for that resource and information. Please take advantage of what Desiree just offered in the chat and take a look at that if that's applicable to the work that you do in Orange County, and certainly encourage you to connect offline with Desiree to get more information on that. But what a great resource for this collaborative to have Desiree sitting on that state entity in that body. So thank you. Others who want to share an update or a development or upcoming event or questions or concerns about the initiative or comments, feedback, now's your time to come off mute or raise your hand and offer your commentary to your colleagues here. Teresa, I see you came off mute. John, I see your hand. John, go ahead.
I just want to say, John Gutierrez at the Orange County Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. If any of you are in Orange County or downtown Santa Ana tomorrow, Saturday, we will be doing a ribbon cutting grand opening for their new flea market. And that will be, the flea market will be all day, but around 11:30, if you wish to join us on the corner of Bush and 4th Street, which is where they have the new building that they're building there. We'd love to have you guys join us at 11:30 tomorrow in downtown Santa Ana. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, John, for that kind invitation. Teresa, I saw you came off mute. Did you have anything to share? Otherwise,
no, thank you. That was an accident.
Okay, no worries. Natalie Nguyen, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead, Natalie.
Hi, good morning. I just wanted to formally introduce myself. My name is Natalie Nguyen. I'm with Charitable Ventures, the fiscal agent for this Surf Catalyst program, and I'm looking forward to working with you all. If you need anything, I'm reachable and I'll drop my email in the chat for your convenience. Thank you.
Great. Well, welcome, Natalie. Thank you so much for joining us and appreciate your in advance. And thank you for all your service and keeping us tidy and compliant with all the contract aspects of this effort. So thank you to you and your team and welcome. Okay, anybody
días.
else? Oh, Apolonio, ¿gusta compartir algo?
Sí, buenos días.
Buenos días, adelante.
Espero que todos estén teniendo un excelente día. Bueno, soy Apolonio Cortés, presidente aquí de Santana, y bueno, soy parte de esta
Apolonio
iniciativa.
Cortés from Santa Ana. Hope you're all having an excellent morning.
Sí, y nada más, perdón que tengo que utilizarte a ti para hacerme escuchar, para poder expresar. La verdad, me preocupa un poquito acerca de esta iniciativa. Mi limitación de el lenguaje.
Yeah,
Yes.
Apolonio, again from Santana, has some concerns about this initiative and as it relates to his language abilities, being a monolingual Spanish speaker. Adelante.
Pero no pueden escucharme simultáneamente, o sea, a lo que mi expresión. Y entonces, pero bueno, la verdad, mi contribución creo que ha sido bien poca y tal vez un poquito diferida, porque no ha sido en el momento en que quisiera haberlo expresado esto.
Yeah, Apolonio feels like his contribution to this effort has been minimal and deferred at times because of his ability to simultaneously grasp what's been discussed over the last several months and wants to.
Aunque estoy emocionado de que esta iniciativa, pues ahora sí, se esté llevando a cabo de manera participativa, pero sí creo que con cierta limitante. Me disculpo con ustedes porque para mí esa es una limitante del lenguaje, de no poder, de no tener intérprete específicamente,
And he,
simultáneo. Gracias.
Gracias, Apolonio. Continues to express his excitement and optimism about this initiative, but wants to issue his apologies for not being able to contribute as much because of his ability to follow the discussions and conversations in these meetings as quickly as he can without having simultaneous translation for his participation, being able to get him to participate more timely. And so, no se preocupa, Apolonio ha sido un contribuyente muy importante de esta iniciativa, pero se entiende y se reconocen las limitaciones que está expresando aquí con nosotros. Agradezco que las comparta aquí con el grupo. Just, sharing with Apolonio that, not to be so hard on himself, that he has been an important contributor to this effort, and certainly very vocal in the pre and post meetings that Maria and I have with him and other members of our Spanish-speaking community, and but acknowledge that we received and are taking into consideration his strong concerns about the limitations he's been facing here.
Gracias.
Thank you. ¿Otras preguntas o comentarios? Other questions or comments folks would like to share before we jump into the next section of our agenda? Okay. Well, without further ado, I'm going to move to item 4.
Yeah.
Sorry, we do have another question. Let's go to Cesar.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Just was wondering what I also understood from Apolonio is that I think he feels he can participate more if he has simultaneous translation. Is that an option, and is that something we can help with?
Absolutely. I think
Yeah.
we'll follow up on the ways that he can feel more comfortable through this process.
Thank you.
Apolonio, la pregunta fue si hay manera, del señor César, si hay manera de proveer servicios de traducción simultáneo para ayudarle a sentirse más cómodo en su participación, y la respuesta de Jesse fue que vamos a ponernos en contacto con usted para ver cómo podemos facilitar ese servicio. Ok, muchísimas gracias. Thank you, César. Thank you, Apolonio. So on the agenda today, en la agenda de hoy, tenemos dos lugares donde vamos a hacer, tomar voto, tomar acción. Two items where we're going to take action. The first is number 4, related to the approval of priority sectors. So, the last few meetings, the group has identified and made selections on priority industries, if you recall. That set of industries was taken back to the state for input and feedback. The state came back and communicated to staff that the selection of industries needed to be less and needed to be somewhere within the range of 5 or 10 at most. And so we're at a point where the list that you had of those priority sectors and industries has been suggested for a reduction to be able to be compliant within the request of the state to keep that within a 5 to 10 range. And so we will be spending some time today just going over what that means and what action, and considering questions or comments that folks have about this action item, and then entertaining a motion and a second to proceed with the formal action on this specific part of the agenda. So for more information, let me turn it over to Jesse to provide a little bit more context. And Austin, if I could ask you to hold your question.
We could think, I'm sorry, we could ask,
Can we
if
take
it's
it out?
relevant, it's
Okay.
relevant, please go
All right,
ahead.
let's go, Austin.
No, I'm fine to hold.
Okay,
Rather hold, yeah.
All right,
okay,
Jesse, let's
perfect.
go
Yeah,
over
let me
you.
jump in. Everyone, thank you so much. Let me go over this. Desiree.
Entonces, que Jesse hace algo, nomás voy a explicar brevemente que vamos a tomar esta primera discusión para la primera acción de la agenda, tocante la reducción de la cantidad de industrias de prioridad que se entregaron al Estado. El Estado regresó y le compartió a Jesse, tienen que traernos una lista nueva que tenga de 5 a 10, pero no más de 10 industrias. Entonces, aquí estamos platicando de eso. Go ahead, Jesse.
Anish, we'll have Maria do some in the chat, do some kind of transcribing to help along until we follow up with him on how best to do things. Sorry, everyone. I mean, I guess I know it kind of feels like deja vu from the last meeting, but a major deliverable is this region deciding what our industry sectors are going to be. The state has been delicate, I think rightfully so, of mandating too much. It's kind of push and pull with them. So we tried to narrow it down a bit because they said they needed more narrow. We then delivered another list. They said, we need you to narrow it down further. So that's the process we're heading down. I would think that this is the final say, that they really kind of said between 5 and 10. And I think given the whole nature of this work, we've always been trying to be more inclusive, give ourselves latitude depending on the strength of the project, because the narrow down we go, yes, we're more focused, but at the same time, it would automatically kind of preclude certain industries from potential funding. So I think as a group, we kind of didn't want to go super hard down that path. So this was the current list. I highlighted, if I go to the next list, is what's in red would essentially be removed. And so if you go to the staff recommended list of 10, then I just put the salary ranges in order to explain the rationale. So I'm going to move forward here with the rationale. A while back, right, you guys kind of selected your 5 priority sectors, like that's in the spreadsheet that you have, right? That's healthcare and social assistance. It was construction, it was manufacturing, food accommodation, and education services. So we still wanted to honor that broader group. Through many of these conversations, it's very clear that there's 2, I would say, philosophies that brought up. One is to continue to support ones that are, let's say, you might, again, I use quote unquote high quality jobs or higher paying, there's more stability, and trying to drive greater equity into those industries versus, we know where our disinvested communities work. And so how do we improve that job quality? How do we make those jobs more resilient? That was very clear in the conversations that there's 2 ways of thinking about how we could apply this funding and the work of California Jobs First to this. So given that structure, honoring what you voted in the past, honoring kind of what was voted on here, we just try to prioritize then the industries we did select. We try to have balance, but then we also try to prioritize just pretty much just based on employment size. And so if you kind of, let me just go back up. The difference between this list and this list, so within healthcare, nursing and residential care facilities had the smallest employment base. And within manufacturing, there were 4 still eligible. Apparel manufacturing and the fabricated metal product manufacturing had the smallest employment base. Education services was only one. We couldn't cut it any further, else we wouldn't be honoring the first 5 sectors. Construction, again, in order just to have 2. So, healthcare will have 3. In this case, manufacturing will have 2. In order to keep 2, construction of building, especially trades, were already there, and they were the 2 largest. And then in accommodation food services, there were only 2. So to honor that, and to keep balance, we kept those 2 as well. So that was really the rationale between narrowing that list. And just so people know, this miscellaneous manufacturing, if you haven't looked at it, that's where medical device manufacturing sits, where, we're arguably, the medical device capital of the country here in Orange County. So this is how we kind of try to drill it down from a staff perspective for you to consider for us to get to that 10 number. And this is where the state was pretty clear. So, we've been patient sometimes with their feedback, but I don't see how they would ask us to go any further. I would be very surprised if they asked us to go any further. And so what could happen? As a group, you could try to say we approve those 10, and I'll go back to the state to confirm that we can proceed with those 10. You have 13, you have other options. There is a list of 13. You could somehow vote for the top 10. It's about whether you want to honor those original categories that the group decided, or we have to kind of come up with a mechanism to say, yes, we want the top 10, but we have to guarantee one industry of that original 5. So we will have to, remove whoever could be 9th or 10th or whatever in order to make sure one of those industries, in order to, again, to honor that first vote. These are the options ahead of you. I think with that, I'll take any questions or discussion. Also, I don't know now if the time is a better time to ask your question, but that's kind of, we have to now do something here. We have to, there is an action item-ish that we have to try to get the group to proceed with. And then we can go to this group. So when it comes to Catalyst, this is some of the direction we can give people, that we're going to focus on these industry sectors to support and fund.
Great, thanks, Jesse. Let's go to Austin.
So I want to make sure I understand the list right. Of course, it's tough for any sector, but I'm most focused on my own sector. If I'm understanding right, the proposal is to keep both accommodations and food services on the list. Is that correct?
Correct. So this is where the list I would like to proceed with.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. What I think it's tough for for any sector to cut down further,
Yeah.
but in our sector particularly, the biggest job categories cut across both. So bartender, cook. Those are critical categories in food services and in accommodations. So it would be kind of crazy to eliminate one and say we could only train people for a bartender for food services, not for accommodation. So I hope they don't cut further, but keeping them both is definitely important.
Okay.
Great, thank you, Austin.
Great observation. Thank you, Austin. Good context.
So Linda, you came off mute. Did you want to share anything?
Oh, yes, thank you. I just wanted to say that I reviewed the material before and the rationale. And I think we should support the staff recommendation because they've done the homework on this. I understand the rationale for it. And I think this was a good distillation while still making available opportunities in all the sectors. So I would make a motion that we take the staff recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Linda. We'll give a couple more comments and then we'll entertain a second if there is a second for your motion. But let's turn to Tony. I think you have your hand up as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering if under the new format that they have put out for part 2, there's a way to get at some of the healthcare issues as underpinnings. What's the phrase that they call them? They're either sector neutral strategies. I would think like ambulatory services is a sector neutral. You could be doing strategies to support career development and ambulatory healthcare services because we need to have an emergency network and etc. Or they have additional strategies. So I don't have a problem with the staff recommendation. I only point out that the fabricated metal product manufacturing is, manufacturing has, you know, supply chain, they pay good wages, things like that. But these fabricated manufacturing is really kind of a linchpin for creative activity across the board. So I'm just wondering, what was the median wage for that category? Because I think that would be very key for innovation across, and maybe that could go in the other sectors.
Yeah, so Dr. can you kind of pull that up on that spreadsheet? Because I have the share screen here, I don't have the same functionality on the back end. But Dr. can
Absolutely.
probably
Already
get
have
that.
$71,703 per year annual.
Okay, that, I mean, I respect that you guys did the work. I just think manufacturing, that's the only one I don't know if there's a way to get at that. That's just my comment.
Great, thank you, Tony. Let's go to Andrew, who has his hand up as well.
I'm just going to second the motion.
Okay, so a motion and a second. We have a motion and a second. Any additional comments or any reactions or additional feedback to the comments that have been offered? Ana, I see your hand is up. Adelante.
Hi, good morning. I'm just wondering if there's anybody in the room that can speak to Tony's question on manufacturing. If you know any additional insight on that particular sector.
I guess, Tony, the question is, would you, because we do have to get to 10, and that's the max range the state at least told us. It would be a question of, I guess, ultimately, do we want to swap that for a different one, right? I guess that's ultimately the decision.
So I guess I'll offer an amendment to the motion, which would be to swap out ambulatory health services with a commitment that we would be looking at that under the other categories for strategies, to make sure that we have a strong safety net and that we are filling it with both facilities and humans. But I would make a substitution for the ambulatory health services for the fabricated metal product manufacturing.
Yeah, we have go ahead, Ana. You have a question or follow-up?
Yeah, just to understand, because I don't have a background or expertise, but I wonder if you could say a bit more, Tony. Like I heard you mention we could reach ambulatory healthcare services in another way.
Yeah, so there's this new, I don't know that anyone knows it for sure, but the state gave a 6-page new direction on part 2. And in that, they ask for 3 different sections of strategies. One of them is about target industries, target sector strategies. Another sector is called sector neutral strategies. I interpret that and are things that general K-12 work, right? We need an educated group. I think healthcare cuts into that one. And then the third one are additional strategies. Oh, okay. Examples of a sector neutral strategies are things that strengthen locally serving sectors. And they also say climate resistant infrastructure. I think healthcare is my opinion, is a sector neutral strategy that no matter what industry sectors you prioritize, you would always want to make sure you have a strong healthcare network. Did that help?
Yeah, and fabricated metal, you said, is a sector that allows for innovation, because and it also provides good jobs. Or
Yeah, so manufacturing is sometimes considered a gold standard because it has the capability of paying high wages. In this case, it's 71,000, so it's clearly within the sphere. But other manufacturing, retail, a whole bunch of things. If you want a product, you go to fabricators and they create the product, the piece. So fabricated metal helps aerospace, it helps canneries, it helps, I don't know if it's technically a traded sector, but it also, I mean, I think we fabricate things that go internationally as well. But maybe our researcher can talk more about what's in that sector.
All right, we're going to go to Teresa and then Andrew, and then we're gonna go back to the two motions we have on the floor. Go ahead, Teresa.
Hi, maybe I'm misunderstanding or I'm a little confused because I agree with both Linda and Tony, but I guess where my confusion is isn't the fabricated manufacturing, can't all of that manufacturing fall under miscellaneous manufacturing, computer and electronic product manufacturing, and specialty trade contractors? Doesn't all of that fall under there, or am I missing something?
But I'll let you kind of jump in more. I mean, but essentially, there are stricter definitions. So that spreadsheet, if you kind of click through, it'll tell you specifically as you drill down. So no, I mean the federal or the NAICS code or whatever entity has kind of classified that as a separate form of manufacturing in order to be more detailed. But Dr. Rod, do you have any more to explain on how that differentiates between those topics?
Yeah, absolutely. Miscellaneous, we don't include the fabricated metal sector. It would not be included in either of these. And then especially trade contractors, that's construction. That's not in manufacturing. And just so you know, fabricated metal product manufacturing includes it includes machine shops, and it includes coding, engraving, those kind of activities. So miscellaneous seems like everything would fall into it, but the way the government classifies industries, it is very specific what's in there. And as Jesse said, Orange County is a big center for medical device.
Yeah.
And medical device would fall into miscellaneous manufacturing. So.
All right, thank you. I don't know that swayed me one way or another. I think I understand both points. I'm not really sure where to go with this.
Okay.
But thank you.
Sure.
Before we go back to our initial motion, Linda, who offered that, is there something you want to offer?
Yeah, I did. I think their consideration here, and it was for me to make the recommendation, is again, unless someone can better inform me, I think the fabricated metal that is more vulnerable to robotics than just about any other kind of manufacturing. And maybe it's just because I've been watching too many TikToks or YouTubes about it. But all of that is just becoming, becoming less dependent upon human labor and human skill sets. So, whereas the ambulatory healthcare services, those are humans, necessary humans. It can't be done by a robot. It can be assisted or enhanced, but not replaced. So.
Okay, thank you.
And just to give a little context about what's in the ambulatory healthcare services, that's offices of physicians, offices of dentists, outpatient care centers, medical and diagnostic labs, and home healthcare services.
Thank you. I'll take a final question from Luis, and then we will get to the action. So go ahead, Luis.
Thank you, Ish, and thank you, everyone. Yeah, I also do want to lift up, like Anna saying in the chat, everyone that's putting time into figuring this out, and also to staff that's put together the recommendation. That said, I do want to call attention to one issue that I'm seeing, which is I feel like we're making these decisions without a lot of information or firsthand information or representation from these sectors. And I feel like that's one of the challenges, the overarching challenges that we have with our initiative. I know that those of us that work with lower income folks in the county have brought this up several throughout the process, that there needs to be these intentional processes on a continuous basis to check in with folks that work in some of these sectors if these strategies make sense. And I feel like when we're trying to decide, about these questions about manufacturing, I'm hearing a lot of you know, secondhand, third-hand data, but not as much from folks in those sectors. So that would help me a lot, you know, to make these decisions, to hear from folks that work in those sectors. And then also I just wanted to call attention to one thing that we've also been noticing is, you know, I'm glad to see the accommodation and food services, and some of the, you know, the sectors with the lower median incomes, because I think that those are large sectors of low income folks that you know, the point of the initiative is to make sure that resources are reaching those lower income communities. So I'm glad to see those are on there. And yeah, to what extent are we focusing it, you know, our efforts on making sure that equity goal is at the center of our decision making. So just that, and thank you, everyone.
Yeah, no, thank you. Maybe I'll pause and give an opportunity for any of you who work in these sectors to come off mute or offer some insight with firsthand knowledge on being an employee within these sectors, if they're just to respond to Luis, and I think one other person earlier made a similar request, but is there anybody who'd like to share with regards to any of these sectors? Si alguno de ustedes quiere compartir, si trabajan en uno de estos sectores y quieren dar información de primera mano para aumentar el entendimiento de los sectores. I'm not seeing anybody coming off mute or raising their hand, but we do have we do have an initial motion from Linda has been seconded, and then we have a second motion from Tony to consider an amendment to the initial motion, which is to substitute number 1 on this list in front of you with fabricated manufacturing.
Hey, Ish, it hasn't been seconded, so why don't I withdraw it and we can go back to the main motion?
Okay, if that's acceptable to you, that works. You're right, it has not been seconded. So let's take action, consideration on the first motion, which has been seconded. So we had a motion by Linda DeMario and a second from Andrew Gonzalez, if I'm not mistaken. And so let's consider an action here on approving this list in front of you of 10. Let's, if you're in favor of this list, drop it in the chat, say, you know, yes or aye, or give us an emoji. I'm gonna give it a couple seconds to capture the A's, and then I'll turn to the nays. So if you want to vote in favor of approving, please do so now. I don't want the little thumbs ups to be confused with the next. Okay. Okay, if you want to vote nay, not approve the list of 10, do so now by going in the chat and saying no or nay, or a thumbs up at this moment. Okay, and if you want to abstain, just put that in the chat, abstention, abstain, or give us your thumbs up emoji now on abstention. Okay.
And then Ish, could you also say that in Spanish, the yes, the nay?
Sure. Si gustan votar para aprobar la lista de 10 que estaban, se presentaron en el chat, pongan sí o pongan no, si no gustan apoyar, y si no quieren votar, nomás pongan que van a abstención o pongan no voto para grabar su preferencia para esta acción.
Es válido, solamente puedo emitir mi voto diciendo sí.
No,
Puede,
no,
o tiene que
Apolo-
ser por
no,
escrito.
no, me lo puede dar aquí también,
Ok.
oralmente, si quiere votar en
Sí,
favor.
sí, a favor.
A favor, okay. Apolonio is just recording that he's voting in favor. Muy bien, gracias, Apolonio. Okay, I think we have a strong turnout for the A's and the yeses, so I think the motion carries approval. With that, we will turn to the fifth item in our agenda today, which also requires action, and that is the consideration of the investment sector coordinator requests for qualifications, RFQ. And so during our last meeting, you may recall towards the latter part of that meeting, Jesse covered and presented the draft RFQ to you all. And after allowing for some discussion on what that document should entail, you know, we're looking for some direction today on whether to move forward with and approve this RFQ to invite candidates to consider applying for these really important positions. And so if we get a motion and approval today, the RFQ will be released with the public and within the region as soon as possible so that we can start securing those positions, which are timely. So before we go into a discussion and consideration of a motion or action, let me turn to Jesse to offer some quick context on this item.
Yeah, Ish, I mean, you said it, we you know, a draft form was shared at the previous meeting. So you've had that for a while. We had office hours for those who were interested. I received comments from members of the collaborative on changes they'd want to see. I believe I incorporated them, but of course the draft was sent to you earlier in the week. If you feel like it wasn't adequately addressed, you know, please let me know. But ultimately, this is for Catalyst, we have funding in order to hire these people, in order to support the work that we have to do as far as growing the industry sectors that, you know, all of you approved, but also those non-sector strategies and even the community development strategies. And we're going to talk about strategies right after this that Tony mentioned as well. So they're supposed to help with kind of anything that's in that regional plan part 2, really their game to be able to try to support bringing down dollars, set up infrastructure, develop an ecosystem here in Orange County. So again, we're just releasing this. And so we'll give it about a month until we see the proposals. Of course, this group has to end up selecting from all the submissions, and then Charitable Ventures will have to start contracting with them. So even then, you know, it's not like these people this isn't us signing up or like, I guess, contracting with people. This is just the release of the RFQ. We'll see who is interested, and then we'll have to select who we want to proceed with. That's still a several month process. And then they're going to have to start the work and build the infrastructure. By then, I hope that this group, we're going to have all of Regional Plan Part 2 wrapped up. And then we can kind of embark upon specifically Catalyst work. So I don't want to roll through the whole document, but it's programmatic. It has nearly everything from a compliance standpoint when it comes to the fiscal agent, because this is ultimately a state contract. So if there's something that you see that you have questions about, I'm happy to address or answer questions about what we're doing here. But ultimately, we need to approve this to release it and just see who could potentially do this work. That's what we're trying to get at.
Great,
and I see one hand pop up. But I'll leave it here, and I can scroll to certain sections if people want to discuss more. But I don't think I'm going to go through the 30-page document.
Great, thank you. And Jasmine, we do see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Just a quick question. I am fine with the document. I was just curious though, do we envision that this is a person who takes this role or an organization? Well, only because the terminology of like RFQ and stuff, it sounded more like a person, but that might just be the state terminology for state contracts.
No, I think we just use RFQ to keep it, because the answer is both. And
Okay,
we didn't really tip with the hands on our scale. So that's why I think RFQ instead of RFP. So an individual or a firm, and you know, the firm could probably do more of the scope of work while an individual does a smaller piece naturally.
Okay, thanks.
Wow.
Sí, hoy no se va a contratar a nadie, pero tenemos que tomar decisión en este documento para después proceder con la contratación de las personas o las organizaciones que gusten jugar este papel. Entonces, estas posiciones están elegibles personas, individuos o organizaciones. Luis, did I see a question in the chat? Let me double check here.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Just and I apologize. I must have missed the email. I hadn't had a chance to review this, but I do have a comment. If it's possible to include now, or if you know, if this is going out the door already, I also see another opportunity when we establish some kind of criteria for evaluating proposals, but I would like to see some language on the coordinator's experience working with disinvested communities, if that's possible.
Yeah, so there's a criteria in there, and let me go ahead and jump in there where that is one of the scoring criteria. I have to get there. Sorry, forgive me as it loads. But it's Luis, it's one of 5 things, all 5. So each topic gets 20 points, so we can just keep it an easy 100. But that is one of the 5 things that we are going to be grading these applications on.
La pregunta fue que si en la criteria de selección se puede tomar en consideración la experiencia que tiene el aplicante en trabajar con comunidades marginadas.
I think it's on page 22.
Y lo que está confirmando aquí que en la página 22 ya está incluida esa criteria. Entonces, la pregunta de Luis parece que ya está reflexionada aquí en el documento.
Okay, I see it. Thank you.
Muy bien. Okay, other questions or comments before I welcome a motion or in a second to take action on this item? Preguntas, comentarios? Antes de... Andrew, go ahead.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, motion from Andrew. Go ahead, Linda.
Oh, just a quick clarification. What I do not recall seeing in here is how many of these positions are we hiring for? How many organizations or people?
Yeah, if I 5, but I can try to review it to make sure it's
Thank you. I couldn't recall. Thank you.
No more than 5.
No más de 5 posiciones se van a contratar en estas en esta solicitud. Okay.
This is Jeff. I'll second Andrew's motion.
Okay, we have a motion from Andrew Gonzalez and a second from Jeff Baugh.
Can I make a quick amendment if folks are okay?
Go ahead, Luis.
I'm hoping it's just a minor thing, but can we remove the words "with projects experience serving disinvested communities"? Just one, I think it's something that we've noticed that, you know, it's very easy for agencies to say, oh yeah, we have our projects that serve disinvested communities, versus folks that have that experience working directly with low-income communities.
Sure, yeah, actually, I don't mean to fight Tony because I know you actually included that as a criteria. So how do you feel?
No, I think it's good. My suggestion though is to go to the criteria above it, because I think there's 2 pieces. But I agree with Luis. You could say experience with projects in similar size and scope, including serving disinvested communities. And then in the 3rd line, just say experience. And Luis, I don't know, do you want serving disinvested communities or with, however you want that? But I do think there's 2 pieces, as in a skill set that can deliver projects in disinvested communities is different than I can build it in Irvine serving a affluent community. So my suggestion, if people are open to it, is to modify the 2nd and 3rd criteria to address disinvested communities.
Okay, Andrew and Jeff, are you amenable to those suggested amendments for your motion and second?
I'll go ahead and hang on my thing. I'm gonna go ahead and speak against the motion. My concern is I don't just want people who just live and talk and just make. I want people who've actually provided actual services and brought home projects that we're asking for, right? We have people to bring home an actual something of substance. People have had that, and think working in those disinvested communities is important. They have show a history of bringing home projects and success, not just I've worked there. So I'm going to speak against the motion, but we'll take a vote on it, I guess.
So
And I would affirm what Andrew is saying. I feel that the way we have it laid out in lines 2 and 3 is adequate to address the concern.
Okay, so you're upholding your original motion in second. We'll take action on that in a second. And then Luis and Tony, are you making a motion for an additional consideration?
So just to clarify, my amendment was or my proposed or alternate motion, whatever it is. I'm saying to keep the second criteria, experience with projects of similar size and scope. I would say to keep that one as is, because I do agree that we want folks to have experience completing projects and in of similar size and scope. So I agree with keeping that one. And just with regard to the third criteria, in terms of folks experience with disinvested communities, we want folks to have experience working directly with. So my suggestion was just removing with projects, experience serving, and we could potentially adding the word directly, experience working directly with disinvested communities. Again, if it's that was my proposed amendment. If folks feel like that's too radical, we can also address it when we're talking about criteria for evaluating proponents.
Okay, so there's some agreement with you, Luis, in the chat, and I think I have some head nodding from Kate. You withdrew your hand up. You were going to offer that. So Kate, Kim Klimlo is agreeing with that. Cesar, one question from you. Go ahead.
I was going to also propose that we look at that in the scoring criteria. But I think I agree with Luis on the nuance that we want to make sure that there is genuine, direct engagement and folks know the communities that they're working with at all sectors, right? With organizations, with different sectors of the spectrum. And then also, if we're really talking about disadvantaged communities, we need to understand how those are being engaged. So I see where Luis is going with this. I think I can go either way in supporting the original motion, but also making sure that the criteria and the evaluation heavily considers that, or if we want to change to the proposal that Luis proposed.
Yeah, and it looks like Tony offered some language in the chat that maybe rephrases that to read, quote, experience with disinvested communities in delivering projects.
And I just want to know, just for everyone, right? Like, so there are in this, we have what we might want to call, again, we use the word elements, but you might want to call their scope of work. And Luis, if you look at it, or again, people might think that it puts a fine point on it, but as you see here, almost everyone says doing these things, especially in historically disinvested communities. So every one of these elements almost has that language in it. So coordinating with partners, there is one where I think it's probably you might want to call more right here. I think Tony, right, like kind of a more outreach for someone who might be leading the outreach around this whole thing. I think we try to use language as much as possible as serving historically disinvested communities. So maybe that's convincing on one side or the other here, but that language is also in the elements themselves when they're saying, I am a strong candidate, that more preference is going to be shown to the people who can speak to those things. So it is very much in there that it's not just like a project in Irvine, but focused on where those census tracts are, again, per the state's guidelines. So
we like Irvine though. Irvine's good.
Irvine's great. Yeah, I'm just, but I just wanted to elevate that for those who are having this conversation.
Jeff?
So allow me to clarify. I agree with what Luis is saying. I understand that sensitivity, but I believe that we have it adequately covered within the elements so that the language on that summary table is appropriate. That was my comment.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Luis, is that explanation or that additional context helpful to you? And are you comfortable with proceeding with the original motion, or would you like to continue offering the amendment?
I I think I feel okay withdrawing the amendment with the understanding that we will address this moving forward, and I do appreciate the language throughout the document. Also seeing Anna's comment in the chat.
Okay, very good. Well, I appreciate the discussion here. That's what we're here for, folks, and the extra context. Thank you, Jesse, for bringing that to surface. Okay, well, with that said, we did have an initial motion and a second for approving this document. And at this point, I will invite those of you who are in favor to approve it to give us a thumbs up or put yes or aye in the chat. And we'll give that a few seconds before I turn to the nays. So if you're in favor, please indicate now. Si está de acuerdo para aprobar este documento, esta solicitud para las 5 posiciones de los coordinadores, denos un sí en el chat o prenda su micrófono e indique oralmente que está de acuerdo. Okay, at this point, if you are in opposition or would like to vote in the nay, please do so by telling us in the chat with the no or a nay, or giving us a thumbs up now. Si quiere votar en desacuerdo, en oposición a la decisión que se está tomando aquí, hágalo hoy.
Este voto tiene que ser ya, perdón.
Su voto puede ser en favor, en oposición, o puede abstener y no votar.
Bueno, creo que me quiero abstener porque honestamente hay algunos detalles que creo yo, bueno, no sé si ya los comentaron, pero creo que sí, bueno, tiene que ver mucho con lo que yo he estado sugiriendo, que es importante, por ejemplo, o sea, yo creo que esta es una oportunidad tal vez para empezar de algo más grande que queremos, a través de esta iniciativa, que queremos realmente generar algunos cambios que sean realmente de un impacto que no sea solamente inmediato, sino que sea esto a futuro. Entonces, creo yo que por ahora me voy a abstener de emitir mi voto porque quiero, hay muchas cosas que ocurren en mi cabeza y que la verdad, bueno, tengo que hablarlo con alguien de ustedes para poderlo exponer de una manera más clara. Tal vez, entonces por ahora me abstengo y gracias.
Muy bien, gracias, Apolonio. Apolonio just wanted to confirm he's going to abstain. He still has, along with this earlier comments, some concerns about addressing some of his earlier concerns, and he sees this as an opportunity to really go above and beyond what we're trying to do with this initiative, I think, with regards to inclusivity and community engagement. So he's going to respectfully abstain. So if others of you would like to abstain, then now's the moment to indicate that in the chat or give us a thumbs up now. Okay. With that said, it looks like the motion passes and we have approval to proceed with publicizing this RFQ, Jesse. All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, we move on to the 6th item of our agenda. And this relates to a discussion. We're not voting on this. There is no action here. Esto va a ser una discusión, un diálogo. No va a haber acción aquí, no va a haber voto. But this is a discussion around a refinement exercise around the strategies document that you've all had a chance to review. So, several weeks ago, you've all been participating or have participated in these subgroups to refine the strategies that we voted on previously. And, staff brought forth this idea of consolidating this feedback into some cohesive strategies. And while this is not an action item, we do have an opportunity today to provide further feedback before the HRTC, all of you, ratify these strategies so that staff can start working on analyzing how these can be embedded into the regional plan part 2, which, as you know, has an August deadline as a deliverable to the state. And so we wanted to provide another opportunity for additional discussion and questions being surfaced around the strategies and potential refinements and consolidations that could occur to bring an additional draft forward. And then we did have a colleague, Tony Simons, who spent a lot of time with this document, very thoughtful feedback and comments, which I think was included in your packets as well for today's meeting. And Tony offered this insight on behalf of the Native American community in Orange County and here in California. And we wanted to also give her a couple minutes to provide some context to her comments in the event that you didn't have a chance to review them in your packet. And so before we jump into a broader discussion, I want to turn it over to Tony to give us an overview of what she brought forth to inform this conversation. And then we'll turn it over to Jesse and then the rest of you for some additional commentary. So Tony, let's jump to you first, and then we'll turn to Jesse for some context after that.
Probably the first thing is maybe just bring up that one slide. And so I am with the American Indian Chamber of Commerce of California. We've shared it with our the American Indian Alaska Native partners. But this is really a piece in motion, and the attempt is not to say this is the end all, but it was, as we started to look at those Excel sheets, it seemed that we were essentially narrowing down our thought processes rather than expanding them in a different way. And so this in no way suggests that the work that the groups are doing is bad or wrong or anything like that. But what we did is we just took a completely different look at it. And we said, rather than trying to prioritize, what if we instead tried to encapsulate the ideas that we're seeing? And what we came up with, and all of this could be edited, so I'm not suggesting this is what needs to go forward, but when we looked at it, it seemed that there were actually 9 major thoughts. And this was based on the high-ranking priorities, the high-ranking strategies, which are more than 50, or I don't know how many there were. It seemed like a lot. Made my eyes roll into my head. So in looking at those, and it kind of came off when Jesse and his team had come up into the categories, I thought, okay, well, maybe there's a different set of categories, and this is what we came up with. So it seemed that at a title level, career pathways was really important to the group. Apprenticeships were really important. Wraparound services, small businesses and entrepreneurship, workforce housing, uplifting community voices, technology and innovation, culturally competent engagement, and sustainable environment. And then looking at the high-ranking votes in those categories, when we started to reshuffle them, we came up with these statements that are phrased as could be an actual strategy. And they're intended to be very meta level. And so they're trying to encapsulate what people have been saying are important to them and are important to deliver in something called a comprehensive economic development strategy. So we kind of worked 2 different ways. So now if you go to the chart on the first page. So as an example, the first one is on career pathways. And what you have in the second column is the overarching strategy, which I just said, we came up with 9 titles, 9 overarching statements. We then went and looked at the highest voting strategies that were in our Excel sheets. And what you'll see here in that third column is we actually have it stated exactly as you saw it. And then at the end of each one, like the first one is invest, support the K-16 education collaborative to build strong partnerships between school districts, community colleges, local employers, etc. And then you'll see in brackets where we actually grabbed that from, and then how many votes that it got. Now, I didn't get into all the votes because that was starting to make me a little crazy, but essentially you will see the actual cross vote. And then what we noticed is that when you took everything that got kind of the higher vote, or if it was, it might have got a lower vote, but it pretty much was in line with the higher voting categories, that it seemed to be there were key themes. So rather than trying to take the items in the third category and edit them down, we just kind of pulled back and said, okay, what do we think is being said in that third category? And that's what the revised sub-strategy list is. It's not edits of the third category. It's trying to encapsulate key themes. And so if you go, as we did it for career pathways, if you go to the next one, and you'll see like there's 15 different career pathways. Apprenticeship scored very high. And it seemed that, and again, I'm not suggesting this is everything, but it seemed that if you took all the different pieces under apprenticeships that were scoring in all the different categories, obviously very important, that maybe you could break it down to 3 core, and we're not calling them strategies, we're calling them actions. And the reason why is it's somewhere in the middle of us doing this exercise, the state came back and said, actually, we don't want you to have 20, 30, whatever. We think 10 is the optimal number of strategies. So that, and by the way, we're at 9. We had no idea, but we just magically came up with 9. So under apprenticeships, we thought it looks like there's 3 core actions that are kind of connecting the dots. And so then if you scroll again. So in the next one was wraparound services, again, a high score. And so I won't go through all of them, but it was, I think this was such an unusual way that it didn't really fit on the Excel sheet. So Jesse said, well, why don't we kind of present it so that people will understand what we were trying to do? And as I said, we're not editing down, we're actually broadening and saying, in a perfect world, if we wanted to do wraparound services for healthy communities and neighborhoods and disinvested communities and keep faith with high voted strategies, the suggestion or the starting point for our discussion would be those 6 actions. And that's it. I don't know if people have questions. It runs on for a bit, but.
Thank you, Tony. And thank you for spending so much time with the document and producing such thoughtful suggestions and feedback. I think that's worthy of a thumbs up and round of applause for sure. Thank you. But let's open the floor up to reactions, feedback, comments from the group. So let's turn to you all. I'm seeing a lot of appreciation for you, Tony, in the emoji sphere. But any questions or follow-up questions, reactions to what Tony has just offered? Okay, it looks like maybe some strong agreement with what you've brought forward. A lot of head nodding of yes. Jesse, let me turn to you to give some additional context and maybe where we're moving with this in the next few months. I think you're on mute, Jesse.
Yeah, well, I think with that, I guess the question will be, do we want to proceed with that structure and format versus what was done? Which, again, as staff, we'll go with what the collaborative wants. So just some context where we were at, I think this is it, right? Is, sorry. So what I shared with you was, there was a lot of input. We even shared with you for transparency's sake, so there's what every subgroup said. So kind of what Tony's version is a version of that. And then we try to consolidate the language. So what you're going to see here is, I would say, again, I would say consolidation. So we tried to fit where people wanted terms and items to be fit. And so what you kind of see here is per the original category. So the state, I think, being flexible and nimble as they should be, they originally said, well, here are the strategies we want you to address: the growth of targeted industries, increasing economic diversification. And that's how we originally categorized it. As Tony mentioned, sorry, it's kind of blocking. As Tony mentioned, like, the state gave a recent update, and that was shared with you at your last meeting. We don't like those categories anymore. You're going to prioritize your industry sectors and you'll develop strategies to grow those. But you can also have sector neutral and economic mobility strategies and regional and community development strategies. And so then what I just did here was took from the original category based on what it said into these buckets. So that's kind of what we have here is the massaging of the language to be inclusive of all the different comments that were had from the different subgroups into this format that we're going to have to then build out, because the state is asking, right, how is this addressing equity? How is this addressing environmental sustainability? So we can go with either choice, or if Tony sees a way, if anyone has a view of how to merge these, again, we can do one or the other, some combination of the both. But soon, we're going to have to work on this because we'd like it approved by the next meeting, so the research team can go ahead and write to all the topics that the state is asking us to address. I think that's background, and I think that should be the conversation for the rest of the meeting is, do we kind of, Tony, and I'm not speaking, do we kind of stick with those primary 9 and we kind of write out more of them, or do we stay true or some combination of closer to this? Either way, we have to select some final language for the researchers to actually start analyzing the implications of these strategies.
Right.
And just for the background, to repeat myself, is remember, like, some of this language was very decentralized. It didn't even come from this group originally. It came from broader groups, right? So we had, more CBOs than just on this, who then suggested language. We did not try to wordsmith it at that point. So the language was all over the place, admittedly. This was the chance to refine it closer to where it might be, again, a little bit more meaty and more clear as to exactly what the strategies could be. And so that's what we got to this point. So this is why, so again, I just want to provide some further background on, we went from like hundreds of people providing input, it getting narrowed down, all of you then taking, as Tony said, a list of like 105, getting it down to a top 21. And then this was refined even further to about 17 or 18. Sorry, so I'll stop talking. I would like to hear people's thoughts on how they'd like to proceed, but that's the 2 things that you saw in the packet, and that's the 2 things you see here if I toggle back and forth.
Great. Thank you, Jesse, for that additional context. We'll start our questions first with Jasmine.
Thanks. So just a clarifying question, because they're both structured differently, but I feel like what I heard from you, Jesse, is on the Excel spreadsheet that you just shared, that top line one, that was required by the state to structure it according to these 3 categories. So if we were to go with the structure that Tony suggested, which is amazing, and thank you, Tony, for doing that work, it doesn't align to those 3 categories, or does it? And I may have just missed that.
I think it easily can, right? So
we would just have to frame it within, we still have to frame it within those 3. Is that right?
Yeah, so we would have to break these down into, right, because this is separate from the sector specific strategy. So we would just take these 9 and then put them into 2 categories, right? Like cultural competent engagement would definitely be the community development strategy. Probably apprenticeship is a sector neutral strategy, right? Regardless of sector, we want more apprenticeships.
Okay.
So I think that would just be a 5-minute exercise with Tony on which 2 categories.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
Because we never saw the state, just like the groups did. We never, we did our work prior to them coming up with their new categories.
Of course. I'm just trying to understand how it all fits together now.
Oh, totally. Great. That's a great question.
All right. Thank you, Jasmine. Ana, I see your hand up. Adelante.
Yes, thank you. I'm clarifying questions as well. I'm sorry if I'm repeating. Of this draft here that Tony worked on, thank you, Tony, for that work. We would be how many of the individual strategies do we end up with? I think I heard you said the 21 got narrowed to 17 in the draft that you're showing, Jesse, and here there's like 9 big categories with a lot of detail. Do we approve, all of the detailed, and how many do those add up to it? Is that essentially what the vote would be? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Tony, I would say, you read the state guidelines as well. Are you envisioning that essentially the primary submission is these 9, and of course the analysis, as you saw in that document, will have to be done based on that? Or what are you suggesting would be the end result of this as a deliverable to the state?
Well, my suggestion would be maybe a work group that tries to combine them, because we did this trying to honor the group's contributions and encapsulating it, and we'd never seen the state new categories. I do think that it could happen. My suggestion is just that rather than, one person, maybe having a group that would work on it to come forward.
Okay, and Anna, so there is no vote today, as just mentioned, but we can follow up with Tony's recommendation. So the next meeting, I think it'll be set up in a way where I think you can approve a yay or nay on it.
Okay, and it would be to come up, yeah, I guess I'll wait until the next conversation to see them. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Teresa, let's go to you next.
Yes, Tony, thank you. This was a tremendous amount of work and I appreciated just going over it was hard. So you writing and getting it all together must have been difficult. But small question. I just want to make sure that this has nothing to do with location of when we finally then start implementing things. This just has to do with the actual general course we're taking and not location specific in any of this, correct?
Yeah, Teresa, location is still going to be based on those original census tracts.
Okay.
Right, which of course there are some throughout the county. So this could be applied to any of those.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Teresa. Cesar, let's go to you next. Cesar, can you hear us? Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
sorry, no, my point was already covered, but thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, very good. All right, Linda, I got you next in the queue. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm going to echo everyone, Tony. Yeah, this was Yeoman's work here. My question is an overarching one. We have 63 members of the HRTC. They all had sort of reviewed the original language and sets of strategies in their truncated, disconnected form, but that's what was approved. I have not read line by line everything that you translated, but I am trusting, and I need to hear from you, as others might, that this was a pretty clean translation or a pretty clean interpretation from one column to another.
It's our intent that it is, and we would want to share it so that others can look at it. But yeah, it was trying to say we think we've covered it, but it's a lot.
Okay.
And I would add, Linda, just right. I would confirm that is true. I think what you saw in the other approach was more language to be more explicitly inclusive, while obviously the trade-off is, as Tony is, it's a much cleaner version here. But then things that people really like are not explicitly mentioned, but I still think encompass. And so now you just have to go philosophically. Do people want the language that they really advocated for in there, or are we comfortable as a group saying we understand that it's inclusive and therefore we could act upon it when it comes to catalyst funding? It's about really more specificity versus, again, I think broadness and cleanness, right? Because I'm gonna be clear, it actually wasn't as crazy as an exercise as people might think, having 50 people provide input on how to reword a document. Actually, a lot of you agreed in a lot of ways, but you can see some of these sentences are robust, let's say, and long in order to include the specific items that people really wanted. And I think that's
having been tuning in for almost 18 months, 2 years, I just don't want anyone here to feel disadvantaged or somehow disaffected because a person, or Tony, with all due respect, because a person or persons took it upon themselves to translate this into another framework. So Tony's suggestion that perhaps, a working group, I'm not real crazy about drawing this out in terms of any more process layering than we need, but just so everyone feels that this is a fair and reasonable translation, I think is important to us moving forward.
Great, thank you, Linda. Points well taken. Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, it's never been our intention to say, this is what it needs to be. We were trying to create a pathway. But the underpinning of this for the American Indian Chamber is that trying to come up with strategies that serve disinvested communities or communities that are historically excluded from the process, and then using majority vote is kind of counter. And so as when Tracy, our executive director, the president of the chamber, challenged me, said, okay, so what are we going to do about that? And I come out of government, so that's traditional thinking. I really had to think about it. And what I said is, okay, we're using voting to narrow down priorities when maybe we should be trying to flip it and figuring out what are inclusive activities, as in we're not throwing out ideas. And so that really was the driver. But I think we do need a working group. We need to have people that are questioning and challenging. And of course, this was done prior to seeing the new revisions from everybody. So maybe it's a process where we take the new revisions and see how they might still fit.
Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, and sorry, I would just say, because we are not voting on this today, it's next meeting. I think we can have that working group meeting, and I'll circle back to see who's interested to try to reconcile the two documents. And then again, the group can decide between this standalone, the reconciled one, or the other one you see. But again, the working group can work on that. We have time. We'd like it the next meeting, so we can definitely do the work between now and then, 3 weeks from now. That will not be an issue. I don't think it'll disrupt our timeline by any sense.
So de nuevo, no se va a tomar voto en este tema hoy, pero lo que sí va a suceder, se va a establecer un comité, un grupo que guste participar para analizar este proceso y comparar los varios documentos un poco más que se están presentando aquí. Si gusta tomar parte en ese proceso, Jesse va a mandar un email, un correo electrónico para ver quién gusta participar en ese comité. Anna, I see you have a hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, somewhat related to Tony's mention about the process that can be inclusive of the multiple voices. We are hosting a third and last community forum. Both Thrive Santana and Cooperación Santana were some of the organizations funded for community engagement. But if you might recall, we advocated early on for a strategy that would have like sustained engagement throughout. And we called it like an iterative process where we could keep coming back to people in the communities affected as the initiative progressed. And so we will have one more opportunity to take back these strategies as well. And we look forward to bringing back some of that feedback into the working groups and yeah, well, obviously, while respecting the voting process that has already happened here, but inclusive of the perspectives of folks directly impacted.
Great.
That's great. And I know you told me, I'm sorry, but I'll circle back on that date, because then again, maybe we think about that working group meeting happening immediately after that with some preliminary findings. That way it can inform the conversation as well.
Thank you, Jesse and Anna, both. Just really quick, para los que estén interesados y gusten participar, ahí acaba de poner en el chat, Ana, un cuarto evento comunitario que se va a tomar el 28 de mayo en las oficinas de Latino Health Access, y puede compartir el volante para que lo distribuyan con sus comunidades también. Y va a haber espacio en esa reunión para platicar un poco de este tema que estamos dialogando aquí esta mañana. Okay, unless there's any other questions or comments, we'll proceed to the next part of the agenda. But any Cesar, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, just to clarify, I think one thing that's in my mind is, I know that a lot of the feedback that was incorporated into these revisions was from discussions with groups and folks on the call here. But I'm also assuming that we were taking into consideration in the information coming from community meetings and other partners. Am I correct in assuming that?
Yeah, so in the sense that right, we that's why we presented the outreach and engagement analysis through different dissections. And then, right, so it was supposed to inform the group where the community was, because we asked point blank, right, what are your recommended strategies? So we asked so that's where the collaborative looked to that as guidance when they selected what could be priorities.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you for the question, Cessa, Jesse, for the clarification on that. Any other additional comments or questions?
Yeah, Ish, can I say something real quick?
Absolutely, go ahead.
So the next meeting's scheduled for June 7th, everyone. Which means the agenda always or typically goes out the week before, so that would be May 31st. That also means the latest date we would possibly send out the agenda with all of the items for all of you to review would be Tuesday, June 4th. So please, if you don't receive the agenda and items a few days before the next scheduled meeting, please email me directly so I can make sure that you have those so that you have enough time to review. So lo que estaba diciendo es que la próxima junta es junio 7, so la agenda va a salir mayo 31, que es un viernes antes. Si no reciben los documentos para el martes junio 4, si por favor se pueden comunicar conmigo, mandarme un correo electrónico para yo asegurarme que ustedes reciban lo que necesitan. And then just so everybody knows too and feels more comfortable, a lot of the documents that Jesse presents, I translate those into Spanish and then review them with our Spanish speaking members on the collaborative the Tuesday before the meeting and then the Tuesday after the meeting. And Ish and I both host these meetings together with our Spanish speaking members. Y solamente le estaba explicando a los colaborativos, a los miembros de la colaborativa que tenemos nuestras juntas los martes, que son el martes antes de la junta. Por ejemplo, este martes nos juntamos todos y luego para el martes después de la junta del viernes para platicar todo esto y traducirlo en español. That's all. Thank you, Ish.
Okay, gracias, Maria. Thank you so much for that additional context. Okay, unless there's any other questions, I think we're going to get ready to adjourn. But before we adjourn, I did want to give a very important and timely development and update that revealed itself as a result of the governor's May revised budget. So some of you may have already heard about this, but in the budget, there's additional reductions to several things that are here in California, some deferments. And unfortunately, this California Jobs First program was not the exception. There is a proposal to reduce the California Jobs First program by $150 million over the next 3 years. $50 million in fiscal year 24-25, 50 fiscal year 25-26, and then fiscal year 26-27. And while that is concerning and does raise some questions about the availability of elements of resources for elements of the implementation and this work long term. I mean, I and Jesse and Jeff and Maria and everybody here from the OCBC team and Charitable Ventures team just want to emphasize that our continued commitment to working with you all to continue building and promoting the sustainable process for creating a more equitable economy in your communities and your county, and that's a commitment that remains steadfast with even in spite of the developments from the state budget. So there is more that is taking place and still needs to be revealed, and the final deliberations up in Sacramento with input from many. But that's certainly something we wanted to be forthcoming and transparent with you all about if you hadn't heard. And perhaps many of you, if not all of you, are dealing with your own considerations and impacts in the revise. So in case you hadn't caught that, we just wanted to bring that to your attention. This collaborative will continue as an inclusive platform for stakeholder engagement. It will continue to play a critical role in achieving the objectives that we're building together. And although the dedicated funding for projects, is welcomed, we know that we could never put all our eggs in the state basket, that we would have to be looking elsewhere to do implementation. So we're not losing hope on resources that may be available with the state, but I think it just adds as a reminder that we need to be thinking about how to resource these strategies and the implementation of these priorities with other sources and other levels of government, other sources from your corporate and philanthropic community, both inside of Orange County and beyond, and try to create a funding model that's diversified and not focused and exclusively on state resources, because there is fluidity with those resources depending on the environment that the state finds itself with revenues and expenses and such. So just wanted to offer that up and encourage all of you to remain focused on the work that we're doing here, on your shared goals and the principles of resiliency and sustainability here and inclusivity. The state will be hosting a monthly call next Tuesday with all 13 of the regional conveners that are shepherding this work across California, and myself and Jesse and others will be part of that conversation to see what sort of updates and new developments they provide additional context. So stay tuned for anything that we learn on Tuesday that we can bring forth in June. But we hope to come back with a little bit more information and clarity on how that situation looks. But rest assured, we remain committed and here to serve all of you, and we really appreciate all the time and dedication that you all have invested in this process as well. So thank you. Jesse and Jeff, I don't know if I won't, maybe turn to you for some comments on that and maybe to close us out.
I would just say that we're going to recap. I mean, we'll see what we get from the conversation with the state on Tuesday, but this plan still has to be delivered to the state. That's not questioned, and nor is Catalyst. That funding, the $9 million to support those pre-development activities, that's not in jeopardy. That work still has to proceed. It's going to be a question of implementation, so we'll get more about that. So it's still not impacting, I think, our work directly. This, and then the 2 years, the next couple months, and then the 2 years after that to do this right. So I just want to make that clear, but we'll get more information about what implementation looks like from the state, and we'll report back at the next meeting, if not before then.
Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah,
Jeff.
I don't have much more to add. Sorry about all the background noise here, but our advocacy team continues to be engaged, watching for updates, and obviously emphasizing with our local electeds the importance of this work. And I just want to reiterate what you said, and that is our continued commitment for this process and moving forward.
Great, thank you, and Jeff and Jesse both for your continued dedication to this and for the clarification on what's impacted and not. But we will get
and Maria, don't forget Maria.
Oh yeah, absolutely, Maria también, and Dr. Walrod as well. But the whole OCBC team, Natalie, you and your team at Charitable Ventures for continuing to shepherd these resources for us. But yeah, folks, if you have any questions about that or any other piece of this, please reach out to us and we will provide you the answers that are available to us. But we should have some more information after next Tuesday's meeting, and we hope to bring some of that to the next collaborative meeting in a few weeks. So with that, I want to wish you all a great weekend. Be safe out there, and thank you for your time this morning. We will be seeing you soon.
Have a good one. Thank you.